So recently, IndyCar released their 2018 schedule, and in the eternal words of Juan Pablo Montoya, it's okay. While there's a decent balance between the natural terrain road courses, street circuits, short ovals, and the super speedways, it ain't a perfect schedule. So today, let's enter an alternate reality where Big Mark Miles decided, you know what, I don't want to deal with this whole IndyCar scheduling business anymore. Let's hand it over to that guy on the internet that rants about bacon product placement and see what he can come up with. My 2018 IndyCar calendar starts off, well, exactly the same way as the official one does, with the Grand Prix of St. Petersburg. St. Pete has been a great partner for IndyCar for over 10 years, and while it's not the most exciting race in the world, it's a good, solid, traditional start to the season. From St. Petersburg, we'd move on for the second race to the Mile in the Desert Phoenix International Raceway. And while the two races that IndyCar has held since its return to Phoenix have been lackluster at best, I feel like the Universal Aero Kit with its reduced downforce will produce a much better show, as cars will be able to spread out and pass on the Phoenix International Raceway the way they used to be able to when IndyCar was running the pre-NASCAR configured Phoenix. So from Phoenix, we would move on to Long Beach, and nothing else really needs to be said about Long Beach other than it's the second highest attended race of the year behind Indianapolis, and also the second longest tenured consecutive race on the IndyCar Series calendar. Again, staying right in line with the regular 2018 calendar, we'd move from Long Beach to BARBER. The local fans support the event, and since the Aero Kit era was introduced, the BARBER race has been excellent every single year. And this is where we diverge significantly from the IndyCar calendar. One of the big moves I would make is to eliminate the IndyCar Grand Prix of Indianapolis. I'm going to be frank here. The Grand Prix of Indianapolis is a novelty that has run its course. It was originally intended to create more hype locally for the Indianapolis 500, and frankly, I believe it has failed to do that. The practice and qualifying crowds have been about the same ever since the Grand Prix of Indianapolis has begun, and frankly, except for the first year of the Grand Prix of Indianapolis, the crowds have been mediocre at best. Add on to that the fact that the on-track product has been lackluster, and from a traditionalist standpoint, it's kind of silly that there are two IndyCar drivers a year now that can claim they have won an IndyCar race at Indianapolis. To me, it's time to put the Grand Prix of Indianapolis out of its misery. But don't worry, we'll replace it with quite a bit of IndyCar racing action in the month of May. One of the things I would do to make it up to the local Indianapolis fans is to start Indy 500 practice a little bit earlier, say May 9th, midweek. It'd be a great time for rookie orientation practice to take place without taking away too much time from the veterans as soon as they get on track, probably starting in the weekend. Why would the veterans of the Speedway and the regular IndyCar drivers start on the weekend? Well, that's because I would replace the Grand Prix of Indianapolis with another race. That race being Mid-Ohio would be the fourth official stop on the Verizon IndyCar Series calendar. Now, Mid-Ohio, you ask, why would you move that up? Well, if you haven't been paying attention to IMSA news, IMSA will be running a race at Mid-Ohio starting next year. And some of the most successful race weekends back in the mid-2000s were when Champ Car or IndyCar paired up with the American Le Mans Series. A doubleheader weekend with IMSA to kick off the month of May would not only be a great thing for business, but frankly, I think it would be a better race to lead into the Indy 500 than the Grand Prix of Indianapolis. And that's saying something because Mid-Ohio is not really the most entertaining track on the schedule. Another positive for doing a doubleheader with IMSA would be the fact that so many IndyCar teams participate in IMSA already. Roger Penske, Bobby Rahal, Chip Ganassi, even Michael Andretti, Michael Shank, and quite a few others are participating in some respect in IMSA. Not to mention some of the crossover of IMSA drivers and IMSA teams into the Indianapolis 500. It would be a good way to congregate the schedules and also give the fans a little more bang for their buck at Mid-Ohio. The next race from Mid-Ohio would be the Indy 500. Yeah, moving on. Continuing our divergence from the 2018 IndyCar calendar would be the elimination of the Detroit doubleheader. My God, I don't care what Roger Penske says, I don't care what Chevy says, Detroit is the worst race on the calendar. It's boring, it's not an interesting circuit design, it's not very good for overtaking or interesting racing, it's just a marketing tool, and frankly, it's not a good follow-up to one of the most entertaining and exciting races on the calendar, which is, of course, the Indy 500. But don't worry, Roger and Chevy. Later on in the schedule, we'll have a little something for your corporate get-together. With the mercy killing of Belle Isle out of the way, we can take the IndyCar calendar from one of the most entertaining races of the year to another one of the most entertaining races of the year. A lot of the times, though, unfortunately, Texas is entertaining for the wrong reasons, it's still very entertaining, and structuring the schedule this way may actually allow for some of the people you hooked into the excitement of IndyCar racing with the Indy 500 to stick around for maybe a couple more weeks by watching Texas immediately after. Moving on, we go to Road America. This is exactly in line with the way the 2018 IndyCar calendar always plays out. Frankly, they've gotten it so right going back to Road America. The racing has been spectacular. The crowds have been very good. It's a positive race all the way around. Not much else to say. From Road America, we would move on to Iowa with all the great Iowan fans who always seem to turn out for the IndyCar racing. The only thing I would change about this race is, for the love of God, make it a Saturday night race again. Why on earth this race was moved to Sunday afternoon, I will never understand. So on my calendar, it's back to a Saturday night short track shootout. From Iowa, we would move to the traditional date of the Toronto Grand Prix. And with Detroit gone on my schedule, unfortunately Toronto becomes one of the candidates for the lousiest race on the calendar. However, maintaining a Canadian presence in the IndyCar calendar is pretty crucial, considering that there may be more than one Canadian on the grid for next year. And again, Toronto is a traditional venue with traditional IndyCar fans. It's probably a good one to keep around, unless you can go to Mosport, in which case dump Toronto as quickly as you can. The second half of the IndyCar season is where my calendar diverges heavily from the official IndyCar one. Remember what I said about Roger Penske and his Chevrolet picnic? While I can offer them Belle Isle, there is a nice 2-mile superspeedway sitting in Brooklyn, Michigan that's unused for most of the year that I think would host his picnic very well. Of course, I am talking about the revitalization of the Michigan 500. An event that hasn't taken place since 2001, and despite the fact that a few IRL pack races have occurred at Michigan in between now and then, there has never been a post-merger IndyCar race at Michigan. So before you start screaming at me in the comments that, oh no, IndyCar would never get a crowd at Michigan, NASCAR can't even get a crowd at Michigan anymore, I would point you to the historical significance of the Michigan 500 added into the IndyCar product on these super speedways as it is now, and I think you've got a combination to bring a lot of old fans and a lot of new fans out to the track to experience IndyCar at one of its most dramatic and exciting racing circuits. It would also help that the return of the Michigan 500 would bring back the Triple Crown of 500-mile IndyCar races, something that's been missing from the calendar since 2015. It's just a little bit of prestige that would help go a long way in establishing IndyCar as a series of events rather than support races for the Indianapolis 500. In keeping with the theme of revitalizing old races, we'd revitalize one that was almost revitalized in real life about 2 years ago. Unfortunately, a certain Cleveland-based paint supplier went to a certain big racetrack sitting in the center of Indiana and said, hey, we'd like to revitalize the Cleveland Grand Prix. And certain big racetrack in the middle of Indianapolis said, hey, that's a great idea, but we also need an official paint supplier for exactly the same price as you'd be willing to spend to revitalize the Cleveland Grand Prix. Wouldn't you rather give the money directly to us? To which the paint supplier said, okay, no really, that's what happened. But in my schedule, we take that paint supplier's money and we revitalize the Grand Prix of Cleveland. Of course, that weekend is open because of the fact that Mid-Ohio moved to the race before Indianapolis, and hopefully we won't cheese off the Ohio sports fans too much by keeping a race on the traditional weekend in Ohio, just at a different traditional venue. Of course, you can't speak too highly of the incredible racing that took place at Cleveland in its heyday. Two wide racing, side by side, lap after lap on the super wide airport runways of Cleveland. Man, IndyCar racing didn't get better than that. And could you imagine, with the modern reliability of the Indy cars and the close racing we have now, how great the Cleveland Grand Prix would be? I know I would be first in line for tickets. Why on earth hasn't this race been brought back? From a couple of great revitalized races to what is now a traditional 500-mile race at the Pocono Raceway. There are only a few improvements I would make to the weekend here, namely re-adding the Indy lights to the calendar and also starting the race with a 3-wide start. Come on guys, it's way more exciting than 2 wide, don't you agree? From Pocono, we'll move on to Watkins Glen. Yes, Watkins Glen. You know, the race that really shouldn't have left the calendar because it's a nice road course and it produces semi-decent racing and Indy cars look fast there and the fans like it and the track likes it and why did this race go away? Maintaining a little bit more consistency with the 2018 official IndyCar calendar, sure, why not? We'll go back to Portland. Now, I will be the first to admit that Portland was never the most interesting race when it was on the kart calendar. There was really only 2 races in its history that I can point to and say those were good races, namely 1986 and 1997. The rest of the races at the Portland International Raceway were meh at best. That's not saying it shouldn't be on the calendar, and in fact, if the local market supports the race, there's a big turnout, and if the racing's halfway decent, there's no reason Portland shouldn't be on the calendar. It's just, to me, Portland should have never been added to the calendar at the expense of Watkins Glen. From Portland, we would move on to Sonoma, and of course, the big key here is that Sonoma is no longer the championship deciding race. It's no longer the last race of the season. Frankly, I would have cut this race as quick as I could have from the calendar. However, we're trying to be a little bit realistic here, and I am well aware that the corporate suits love Sonoma because there's nothing corporate suits love more than sitting in their corporate suite, sipping a little bit of wine and not paying a lick of attention to the race. And boy, oh boy, is Sonoma the perfect racetrack to do just that. However, that again is not the way I would describe the racetrack for your dramatic championship deciding race, and therefore that's why Sonoma will not be the championship deciding race. It just frankly isn't a track that is conducive to an exciting battle for the win. It's not got very good passing zones, not very long straightaways. A lot of times the most exciting thing that happens at Sonoma is the first turn pileup, and that's just the honest truth. So where do we finish the IndyCar calendar? Oh yeah, Gateway. Yes, Gateway was one of the biggest success stories IndyCar has had in a very long time. They even sold the cheap seats at the bottom of the grandstands. I can't remember the last time I saw an oval race that sold the cheap seats at the bottom of the grandstands. This race was a full house, packed IndyCar race, 30 to 40,000 people there to see an IndyCar race, and the race was fantastic with a fantastic move by Joseph Newgarden to win the race, and ultimately it would prove to be the move that won him the championship. Now just imagine if that move had taken place to win the championship in front of that big of a crowd, with the celebration that would have taken place and the crowd absolutely screaming their heads off. Man, what a dramatic stage to end your IndyCar season. You end it in the Midwest. You end it fairly close to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so the Indianapolis market can go support the race. You ended on an oval, so everything is very exciting from that perspective. I think that's a win-win-win-win for everybody involved. The promoters obviously deserve it as far as I'm concerned. The Bommarito Auto Group, along with the Gateway Motorsports Park, all those people deserve to have a huge event, something to really push, really to promote, because they were able to do something that most tracks that have gotten an IndyCar race in the last 20 years were unable to do, and that's get a crowd to turn out for an IndyCar race. So again, I couldn't be higher on Gateway. They need to make this race, Gateway, the season finale, and that's what I would do in my IndyCar calendar. So, that was my 17-race IndyCar calendar. What did you think of it? Let me know down in the comments below. Did you hate it? Would you do it differently? What races would you replace? What races would you keep? Did I get rid of some races that you think I should keep? Let me know why down in the comments below. And if you enjoy these IndyCar Red Pill episodes in the off-season, be sure to hit the like button as well. Thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube, and we'll see you in the next video.